Yo, AO the plug next sniper, so deadly they retired his call sign. I'm in the crib trying to be the nicest of all time. Rap battle when a Putin's nukes and stop it dropping with one line.
Okay, why'd you call the new album No School?
No school, just kind of playing on, kind of like an old school versus new school situation. I'm just trying to bridge the gap between the two. So no school, kind of somewhere in between or neither of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you went into the project trying to make something like middle of the road, like not for any era.
Yeah, I mean, I started making like beats and hip hop back in the late 80s and early 90s and then kind of went away from that. And made a lot of different kinds of music over the past like 20 years. And then in the last like 10 years, got back into making beats and production and, just got inspired by like a lot of the new stuff that's out now too. So it was kind of like a way of, kind of bridging that time gap, in sort of my musical world. And you heard the album. It's got like elements of like, old school, sampling and everything, but then it's also got some, newer kind of like progressive edges to it as well. So
what exactly brought you back to hip hop after doing other genres of music?
Basically, what I just said was like, I think in the last like maybe 10 or 15 years, I started just getting inspired by like a lot of the newer stuff that was happening like in the underground and, and I also was, starting to like make beats again, like as a, from the other music I was making, I just started, producing beats and stuff and was kind of collecting like a nice, catalog of beats and decided to, start doing stuff with that again.
So who are some of the artists that inspired you from this generation?
I think, like a lot of people, a lot of the Backwoods catalog. So, Arm& Hammer and Billy Woods. And, as far as producers go, I think in recent times, probably like Child Actor and Controller 7, some of the Alchemist stuff. And, just there's a lot of like cool production going on right now that kind of, I was like, yeah, this sounds interesting and cool and different. And I felt like that was kind of inspiring me to like dive into making some beats again and getting back into it.
How long did it take you to put No School together with all of the people?
It took about a year total to put it all together. I started it in I think February of 24 and then just finished it up like a few months ago. So it was pretty long process. I think any producer, if you talk to someone who's made like a producer record, that's kind of like usually what happens. It's like you send beats out to different people. Well, first I contacted a bunch of MCs to find out who I wanted to work with or who wanted to work with me and wanted to like make tracks together. And then once I connected with different people, then it was sending beats out. Sometimes I'd send people like a pack of beats or just one beat, to work with. And then, kind of waiting for them to record their verse or their part, send it back to me. And then I did all the, mixing and construction and like piecing all the songs together, as well after I got everything back. So yeah, it took about a year's worth of work, to get it all together.
Not bad.
Yeah.
I've heard worse.
Yeah, I'm sure this project's, it's taken so much longer. For me, it was like, it was also, I have a full-time job and stuff too. So I'm like juggling music and work. And, so I was just trying to like get into the studio when I could and work on it and then had to go do other stuff. But, it was a lot just kind of like trying to stay in the zone and make I really wanted to make everything sound like it all fit together on one record, and kind of make the things flow well and go together. So there was a lot of like post-production work too after I finally got all the features and verses like from people. Yeah.
The first single from the album was "We Are One."
Yeah.
How did that one come together?
That was like, I think, one of the earlier tracks. I met, I think that was after I met Jesse the Tree. He came through here. I live in Burlington, Vermont, and he came through here with Shrapnel on tour, and I hung out with those guys and met Jesse. And I don't know if you've met Jesse. He's just like the sweetest dude, super nice guy. And I had kind of pitched him, at that time. I was like, I'm working on a record. I want to send you some stuff. And he was like, yeah, for sure. So he was, totally gracious and like, gave me a verse. And then he had like, wanted to do a track with Monzi, cause they were kind of buddies too. So they kind of like, collaborated together to like, okay, let's do this track together, and so then Monzi, who's in Chicago, sent me his part. And, I wanted to just, thought that was just like it's like the lead off track to the album. And I thought, it'd be a good first single. It's kind of like just a good, pretty straightforward hip hop track, and I think they both, have great verses on it. So that felt like a good, lead off single for the album. Yeah.
The song "Two Stars," it has that upright bass in it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a sample or is that something you played?
It's samples. The whole record is samples. So I'm a big, as you can see, I'm a big, vinyl collector, and I've been a big like crate digger for years. Since I was in junior high school. So yeah, the whole record is pretty much all samples. There's some little bit of drum machine stuff in there or whatever, but even all the drums and breaks and everything are all from lots of different sources. So, but without going into it, yeah, I've loved that particular bass sample for a long time, and I've always wanted to make it into a track. And so, I was kind of saving it for this album to like put it together and make it, make a beat out of it and make it into a track. So
I love that upright bass sound. It's
so good.
It works on anything, any era.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds good when you get some good drums under it too. And it's just like, and then I was, totally blessed to get, that track came about, No Sag from New Kingdom, like he laid down his parts first. And then, it was kind of just sitting there for a while. And then the very last feature that I got for the record was Mike Eagle. And, it was just like the perfect fit. He of course, he just slayed his verse. And when he sent it back to me, I was like, this is perfect. And then I kind of, sculpted the track a little more around his verse as well. And I love the two kind of contrasting styles that they bring, to that track and that beat.
What's in your production workstation?
It's pretty much like sampling. I got like Technics 1200 or a sample off vinyl, and that comes straight into my computer. I've got, I either work on a laptop or right now I'm like on a, iMac desktop computer. But, and then once it's in the computer, it's all, software based. So I use Ableton Live and lots of like plugins, different types of plugins, and kind of editing and chopping up samples from there, and kind of, laying stuff out and sort of arranging it, on the, in the arrangement view and getting the track laid out that way. So,
okay.
But yeah, I've always been like a big like computer music guy. So I don't use a lot of, a lot of producers use like, pads or samplers or all sorts of different things. But I've always I like making stuff in the box and kind of exploring what I can do in there, so.
Your production is unconventional. How would you describe your sound?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. I think this kind of like no school sort of mentality kind of goes into that. I was a huge hip hop fan, like in that golden era from like 1988 to 95. I was like obsessed with hip hop, and that's how I started making music. I was making beats back then, on like cheap sampler and like 4-track cassette recorder and turntables and stuff. So I feel like my heart and my roots are like there, like getting like drum breaks and like funky samples and just things that just kind of catch my ear, that I think will make like a good loop or a track or whatever. And then I sort of build off that, once I find a good sample that I like, or a little chop or loop or whatever. And I have like on my computer, I have so many like, I don't know, hundreds of chops or like loops or samples, and they don't always make it into like a track or a beat, but I kind of go through them all and try to like find ones that feel like inspiring or just that might connect with something. So, but I think maybe so that's kind of the core of the tracks that I make, but then the rest of the production is like, I think is kind of, inspired by like a lot of the other music I make. I do a lot of like electronic music, ambient, drone, kind of computer based music. So I've kind of brought a lot of those techniques of like manipulating sounds and processing sounds and kind of structuring things in different ways into my beat making. So I think that can make some of it sound a little different, at least, so it's funny because the majority of my music, if you listen to it, it's a little more like experimental, but I feel like when I'm doing the hip hop stuff, it's kind of coming back more into a little more inside, and then it kind of like takes elements of both of those worlds, if that makes sense.
Perfect.
Yeah.
The last song on the album features the legendary Craig G.
Yeah.
How did you get Craig? What is it Craig G on your album?
Yeah. So, when I started to like make or conceptualize the album and think about what I wanted it to be, and I had like, a lot of beats I wanted to work with, I basically just made a really long list of MCs that I love, that I like their music. So it was kind of in two categories. It was like some like newer school MCs who are like, part of the indie underground right now. So I had like a long list of people like that, people that had been like listening to their music on Bandcamp or streaming or whatever. And then I had a second list that was like legends, it was like all my favorites since back in the day. And, a lot of those people, like, it's a total long shot for me, they don't know who I am, but so I tried to reach out to as many people as I could. And, obviously, I didn't hear back from a lot of people. Some people, asked for a lot of money or, just don't want to work together, which is cool. And then there were other people who were totally down to like work on a track together or had a totally reasonable like feature fee or whatever. And Craig was one of those. I reached out to him and I had this beat that he raps over. When I made that beat, I felt like, okay, I wanted to get like an older school MC on it, who's still active. And so I felt like when we started communicating with each other, I felt like, okay, this is like a perfect track for him. So, and the cool thing was he was like, I'll write a whole song to it. He didn't want to just do like one verse, he was like, I'll do 2 verses and make a chorus and everything. So the cool thing was, the other thing he asked me too was, can you give me like a theme for the song? And I'll just write to that theme, And so I gave him some like, sort of like vague or general like ideas for like the vibe and the theme for the song. And he kind of fleshed out the whole piece from that. So super cool, man. Like he's a total legend, it's just like Juice Crew original. And, that also felt just like a great closing track on the record. It's kind of a banger and, it's cool to have him on there. So
Super dope. Man. Super
Yeah.
dope. So, who spit your favorite verse on No School?
I don't want to offend anybody, but I think I was most hyped when I got Open Mike Eagle's verse. I'm a huge fan of his stuff, especially his recent work, like the Previous Industries album from this year, and then his last couple solo albums. I just thought, his his pen game is just like top notch, and I think it's also because it was like the last piece of the puzzle that I got for the album. I was just like so excited when I got it, and he was super cool about doing it, and he was down to contribute. So, but honestly, it's funny when I'm making an album like this, I've listened to all these tracks like hundreds of times or maybe more because, mixing it, working on it. And I honestly never got sick of any of the tracks or any of the verses. I really love like everything that everyone contributed, and super happy with how it all came together. There were a couple, there's like 2 or 3 other tracks that just didn't make the album because of like, they didn't fit with the vibe or just for length, kind of length considerations. But yeah, pretty much how everything came together, it really all worked out, so, but it's hard to pick a favorite, honestly.
All right, man.
Yeah.
Last question.
Yeah.
Who is the No School album made for?
Who's it made for? Oh, that's a good question. It's made for anyone, man. It's just like, if you love music, check it out. But, I think it's made for that kind of like somebody like me who grew up, and loves like classic hip hop, but also, people who are still following like new hip hop and like are interested in stuff that, is kind of like pushing the edges too as well. And so that's kind of what I wanted to do with this record, was just really kind of like bring, some of those worlds together and make a record that, is like, it's not too abstract, but it has some moments, where it gets a little more abstract, but it's still like you said, there's like funky bass lines and stuff you can like nod your head to, as well. So, I think it's for those people. And honestly, like, I really wanted to make this project. It's something like I've always wanted to make an MC record, since I was in high school making beats in my basement. So it's kind of like this cool, for me, it's like a nice full circle moment where, I can make the record I wanted to make right now. Cause I felt inspired to do it. And that's kind of where my musical and creative energy is right now too. And so it felt like the right time to do it.
Asterisk. Thank you for joining therealhiphop.com.
Thanks a lot, man. Appreciate you having me on, and hope to hear from you soon. Thanks.
You're welcome, bro.
Peace. All right. Peace.
And I was already go expelled from school, one teacher at a time, still sketching like a reverend, 1 eye in a row. My body yelling, hit me up before I go cold. I'ma catch a fire, stir it up and rumble, young man. I'm younger than I was back then. What's the message in this? I got to home myself, just in the ghost of my nights and wine and roses alone. Outside in the jungle where this child was born, so all alone in the jungle when I lost my head. Watch a spin, roll glass, right.